Hey Keith, following up from our conversation on Friday about looking at some refinance options and pulling some cash out. I've put this in an attachment, but I've found over the recent months that doing a little video walkthrough of the numbers is a way more efficient and effective way for us to communicate on what the options look like. So feel free to call me, email me with any questions, but this is my way of articulating the options without being face to face with you. So the report shows four options. The first three are all conventional financing, and the fourth is FHA financing. Now, FHA financing is typically known as a program that's used by first-time home buyers to purchase a home, but that's not an accurate representation of FHA. FHA has its place for a number of different applications, and this ultimately might be one of them. But let's first look at the conventional loan options. They vary based on the cash back. So this first one is 60, second's 40, and then down to 30. Now, the lower cash demand you have, the lower the closing costs are going to be. But the rate, at least as far as this illustrative example, is all the same. Now, there are lower interest rates, but they come with higher closing costs. And as you'll see, the closing costs on these options are already on the high side, so I'm not too sure I would be a proponent of you buying the rate down any further. But you can see where the principal and interest payments are, so this doesn't include taxes and insurance. You might have to add a couple $100 or more per month for those, but your taxes and insurance don't change when you refi. They don't change from one loan option to the next. So this is more just from a comparative standpoint. And the closing costs you can see in highlighted yellow are as your score is right now at 642. And I've indicated in red how much you would save if the score went up over 660. Now, I did use my credit simulator tool, and it did not indicate ways of getting a score over 660 unless that, I think it was schools, right? Yeah, the school's account removed that late that was reported. You only had one late this summer. It was July of 2019. If they remove that, then you can see what this translates into lower closing costs for you. Now, there's no guarantee, but the simulator says that the score will go to 668. But without that, you can see this one's costing $9,000, the 50,000's at $6,000, and then we're finally getting into a reasonable amount of closing costs at $3,000, but this is with only 30 cash out. So the alternative, if we want the higher cash out but not the higher corresponding closing costs, is to look at this FHA option. Now, FHA I feel like is applicable for us to consider in this scenario for two reasons. One is FHA financing is not as demanding on credit scores. And secondly, rates are better on FHA loans than conventional loans. So let's scroll to the top and see how this option plays out. The rate is almost a full percent lower at 3.625%. FHA loans, unfortunately, always have mortgage insurance. So even though we're going to keep more than 20% equity in the house, there is mortgage insurance. But if you compare this first option, where you get 60,000 back, and this FHA option, where you're also getting 60,000 back, the payment is within $9 of each other. So this one is $1,005, and this one is $996. So the lower interest rate and the higher mortgage insurance more or less cancel each other out. This mortgage insurance would be in place for a minimum of 10 full years. So it's not like it would go away anytime soon. The only way to get it to go away would be if you refi again, or to sell the house, of course. Now look at the closing cost difference though. This one was clocking in at $9,000, and this one with your credit score as is under 5. So I feel like this is a much more cost-effective way of getting $60,000 cash if that's truly what's kind of most important in this transaction. If that's not what's most important, if it is instead, hey, let's just stop the bleeding with the credit card debt and consolidate those two, but not much else in order to keep the closing costs low, then I would consider something like this, where you're only pulling 30 out, but you're not paying an arm and a leg for closing costs. I always get nervous when we're trying to pull 50, 60,000 out, and we're paying almost 20% of that, or 15% of that in closing costs here. So yes, it does come down with a higher credit score, but these are still high numbers. So I would strongly consider the FHA option. Again, the downside here is you've got mortgage insurance, but that's largely offset by the lower interest rate. And then FHA transactions are a little more demanding when it comes to the condition of the property on an appraisal. But I think we talked on Friday, there's no big dilapidated or halfway completed repair projects on the house. So I don't see that as being a real downside, but if we're trying to poke the flaws in the FHA refi option, I don't know, I'm stretching, but that's kind of one of them. So by all means, give me a call with any questions after you get a chance to review these and kind of take in this auditory example. And if we need to go over it again, I'm happy to. Give me a call. I'm around all week.